Hamilton shakes Red Bull by claiming that this year he will be driving the best car he has ever had. Stay until the end to hear Hamilton's surprising statements. Subscribe only if you want Hamilton to win his 8th World Championship and be crowned as the greatest driver in history. Hamilton finds himself standing at the precipice of a journey that defies the logic of his storied career, a moment he never truly envisioned, not even in the grandest fantasies of his youth or the most ambitious goals he set for himself when he first stepped into a Formula One car. After 7 world championships, countless records, and 2 decades of dominance at the pinnacle of motorsport, he is now embarking on a new chapter that is as uncertain as it is electrifying. He is not simply moving to another team, he is entering a realm that exists in its own universe, one that is as revered as it is ruthless, as awe-inspiring as it is unforgiving. Ferrari is not just a racing team, it is an institution, a monument to the very essence of Formula One, a place where legends are either made immortal or are buried beneath the weight of expectation. From the moment he stepped onto the sacred grounds of Maranello, the air itself felt different, thicker, charged with an energy that pulsed through the walls of the factory. There was an almost reverent silence as he walked through the corridors, every step echoing the ghosts of the greats who had come before him: Ascari, Lauda, Schumacher. The red walls, adorned with trophies and images of past glories, bore witness to the countless men who had donned the red suit before him, some of whom ascended to eternal greatness, others who faltered under the relentless scrutiny that comes with driving for the Scuderia. There was something almost otherworldly about it all. This was not Mercedes, not McLaren, this was Ferrari. And Ferrari does not bend to the will of a driver, no matter how many titles he brings with him. Subscribe only if you want Hamilton to win his 8th World Championship and be crowned as the greatest driver in history. The first time he was taken into the heart of the factory, where the 2025 Challenger was being crafted, he felt something shift deep within him. The Ferrari was not just a Formula One car, it was something more, something that seemed to breathe with an almost sentient energy. The sleek aerodynamics, the curves sculpted with precision, the obsessive attention to detail that had gone into every millimeter of its design. It was art, forged in carbon fiber and born from decades of unrelenting pursuit of perfection. The car was more than a machine, it was a statement, a promise, a weapon built for a singular purpose: to reclaim the glory that had eluded Ferrari for over a decade and a half. The first time he sat in the cockpit, an indescribable sensation washed over him. He had driven countless Formula One cars in his lifetime, each one an evolution of the last, but this felt different. The moment his hands wrapped around the steering wheel, there was a gravity to it, an unspoken weight of responsibility. He could feel it in the way the buttons were positioned, in the responsiveness of the controls, in the way the seat molded around him as if the car itself was trying to become an extension of his body. When the engine roared to life, the sound was unlike anything he had ever heard before, raw, guttural, filled with a primal fury that seemed to reverberate through his very bones. It was not just an engine, it was a heartbeat, a pulse of history and ambition merging into one deafening scream of intent. But beneath the undeniable allure, the artistry, the mythology of Ferrari, Hamilton knew the reality that lay ahead. This was not a dream, this was war. Ferrari, for all its prestige, was not a place of comfort. It was a battleground, where politics often dictated results as much as talent did, where the pressure from the tifosi and the Italian media was not just an external force but an omnipresent specter that loomed over the team at all times. He had seen it happen before: Vettel, Alonso, even Schumacher in his early years. Drivers who, despite their greatness, had to fight against more than just their rivals on the track. They had to fight the expectations, the culture, the relentless demand for success that consumed everything in its path. Subscribe only if you want Hamilton to win his 8th World Championship and be crowned as the greatest driver in history. Subscribe only if you want Hamilton to win his 8th World Championship and be crowned as the greatest driver in history. He was stepping into a team that was not built around him. Unlike Mercedes, where the foundation had been laid for him to thrive, Ferrari was Leclerc's domain. Charles Leclerc was not just another teammate, he was the Prince of Maranello, the driver Ferrari had invested in, nurtured, and anointed as their future. He had been there since 2019, forged in the fire of the Scuderia's internal battles, intimately familiar with the inner workings of a team that did not easily yield to outsiders. For Hamilton to succeed, he would not only have to prove himself on the track, he would have to navigate the labyrinthine internal politics, win over the engineers, the strategists, the mechanics, and most importantly, the decision-makers who wielded the real power within Ferrari's hierarchy. There would be no honeymoon period, no grace given because of past achievements. The tifosi, as passionate as they were, had no patience for anything less than immediate results. They adored their champions, but they turned on those who failed them just as quickly. If Hamilton did not win early, if he struggled to adapt, if Leclerc outperformed him, the narrative would shift in an instant. The British press would defend him, but the Italian media would be relentless, dissecting every mistake, every lost opportunity, every sign of weakness. And Ferrari, as history had shown, was not a team known for unwavering loyalty. They had discarded champions before, sacrificed drivers in the name of internal harmony, made decisions that defied logic but satisfied the politics of the moment. Beyond the internal challenges, there was the undeniable question of time. Hamilton was entering this new phase of his career at the age of 40. While he remained in peak physical condition, the reality of aging in Formula One was unforgiving. The younger generation, Leclerc, Verstappen, Norris, Piastri, was hungrier than ever, pushing the limits, evolving their driving styles, adapting to the ever-changing technical landscape of the sport. Could Hamilton still match their relentless pace? Could he still extract those final tenths that had defined his dominance at Mercedes? And then there was the car itself. Ferrari had shown flashes of brilliance in recent years, but they were also plagued by inconsistencies, strategy blunders, and reliability issues that had cost them dearly. Even if Hamilton delivered his best performances, it would mean nothing if the team continued to falter under pressure, if they repeated the mistakes that had derailed their previous title campaigns. The reality was brutal. This move was not a guaranteed pathway to an 8th world title. It was a gamble, a high-stakes bet on his ability to not only adapt but to elevate Ferrari to a level they had not reached since Schumacher's reign. Subscribe only if you want Hamilton to win his 8th world championship and be crowned as the greatest driver in history. Hamilton knew all of this. And yet, despite the risks, despite the uncertainties, despite the mountain he would have to climb, there was something undeniably exhilarating about it all. He was no longer just fighting to extend his legacy. He was attempting to rewrite history, to do what only a select few had done before him. To conquer Ferrari was to achieve something that transcended championships, statistics, and accolades. It was to cement himself as one of the greatest to ever do it, in a way that even his 7 world titles could not. But he also knew the other possibility. If he failed, if the experiment collapsed under the weight of its own expectations, if he ended up lost in the chaos of Ferrari's eternal internal struggles, it could become the greatest miscalculation of his career. This was not a move that left room for mediocrity. He would either rise to the occasion, defy the doubters, and ascend to a level of immortality that few had ever reached, or he would fall, swallowed by the very machine that had seduced so many before him. This was Ferrari. This was his new reality. And there was no turning back. From the very first lap, Hamilton knew he was experiencing something beyond the ordinary. The Ferrari wasn't just another fast Formula One car, it was something else entirely. The way it responded to his slightest inputs, the way it danced on the limit through every corner, the way it felt alive beneath him, it was intoxicating. It was unlike anything he had driven before, even in his years of unparalleled dominance at Mercedes. This machine had a soul, an energy that pulsed through every fiber of its carbon fiber body, a rawness that modern Formula One cars had all but lost in their relentless pursuit of perfection. It wasn't just about efficiency, balance, or pure speed, it was about something deeper. It was about emotion. It was about connection. Every movement felt amplified, every sensation heightened. He could feel the road beneath him with an intensity that made every lap a discovery, every braking zone an opportunity to push the limits further. It was as if the car was speaking to him, whispering its secrets, waiting for him to fully understand its nature. And yet, as thrilling as the experience was, Hamilton was under no illusions. This was just the beginning. Learning to tame this beast, to extract every last drop of performance, to mold it into an extension of himself, that would be the true challenge. He knew that adapting to this new reality would not be a simple task. Every detail of the Ferrari environment was different from what he had known for over a decade. The team's philosophy, its engineering culture, the way decisions were made, the way problems were approached, none of it was familiar. At Mercedes, he had been the centerpiece of a well-oiled machine, a team built around his strengths, a structure refined to perfection to maximize his success. Now, he was the outsider. Now, he was the one who had to adjust, to integrate into an operation that had been functioning without him for years. He had to earn trust, to prove himself all over again, to understand and embrace the nuances of an entirely new system. But rather than resist it, he welcomed it. He saw it as the greatest test of his career, a challenge that could define his legacy in a way that even his 7 world titles had not. This wasn't just about winning races. It was about proving that he could evolve, that he could master a new environment, that he could take a team that had long been searching for glory and elevate it to heights it hadn't reached in years. And yet, even as he embraced the challenge, he knew there would be obstacles. The political landscape at Ferrari was unlike anything he had faced before. In Brackley, everything was structured, methodical, built on a foundation of stability and unity. At Ferrari, things could shift in an instant. Alliances could be made and broken, leadership could change overnight, priorities could be redefined with little warning. Even the engineers had a different way of working. They were passionate, driven, brilliant, but their approach to problem-solving was rooted in a culture that placed emotion at the center of everything. Then there was the media. The relentless Italian press, the unforgiving scrutiny of the tifosi, the constant expectation to deliver, not just results, but spectacle, passion, drama. At Mercedes, success had been measured in cold, clinical efficiency. At Ferrari, it was about more than that. It was about making history. About capturing the imagination of millions. About carrying the weight of a legacy that stretched back to the very foundations of the sport. And of course, there was Leclerc, the golden boy. The driver Ferrari had invested years in, the man who had built his entire career around one singular goal, to bring the championship back to Maranello. Hamilton knew better than anyone that he was stepping onto Leclerc's turf, into a team that had been designed around him, where every relationship, every process, every instinct had been shaped to suit his style. Leclerc wasn't just quick, he was devastatingly fast over a single lap, capable of extracting speed from a car in ways that defied logic. He understood the Ferrari's quirks, its strengths, its limitations, and he had the full weight of experience behind him. Beating him wouldn't be easy. Matching him, let alone surpassing him, would require something extraordinary. And yet, Hamilton had never been one to back down from a challenge. He had faced the best before, Alonso, Vettel, Rosberg, Verstappen, and he had emerged stronger every time. This, he told himself, would be no different. But there was another factor, one that he could not ignore, the car itself. Ferrari had long been known for producing machines that required a unique driving style, a particular technique that was entirely distinct from what Hamilton had spent years mastering at Mercedes. Their cars had always been aggressive on corner entry, demanding a precise, fearless approach to braking, rotation, and throttle application. Leclerc had adapted to this over time, but for Hamilton, it was an entirely new challenge. He had spent years refining his driving to match the smooth, balanced, high downforce philosophy of Mercedes. Now, he had to unlearn those habits and rebuild his style from the ground up. And what if the car wasn't good enough? What if Ferrari had taken a step back instead of forward? What if he found himself fighting the same frustrations that had plagued Vettel and Alonso before him? Capable of winning races, but never quite able to mount a sustained title challenge. What if the team wasn't ready to support him in the way he needed? Doubt wasn't something Hamilton allowed himself to dwell on, but he wasn't naive. He knew that success at Ferrari required more than just raw speed. It required patience, political savvy, the ability to navigate the internal complexities of an organization that operated unlike any other. It required resilience in the face of setbacks, a willingness to endure the chaos and uncertainty that came with racing for the most iconic team in the world. This was the final frontier of his career, the one thing that had eluded him, the one challenge that could elevate him beyond being just a seven-time world champion. If he could conquer this, if he could take Ferrari back to the top, he would achieve something that even Schumacher had taken years to accomplish. He would cement his place in the sport's history not just as one of the greatest, but as the greatest. But he knew the road ahead was long. There would be struggles. There would be frustration. There would be moments when doubt crept in, when the enormity of the task seemed insurmountable. But he had made his choice. He had stepped into this arena, knowing full well what it would demand of him. Now, it was time to prove that he was still capable of rewriting history. There was something almost poetic, almost cinematic, about this transition. It was the culmination of a journey that had begun decades ago, a dream that had flickered in the mind of a young boy watching Ayrton Senna dance through the streets of Monaco, his heart pounding with the thrill of speed, his mind already envisioning himself in the seat of a Formula One car. But not just any car. Ferrari Red. The color of legends, the machine that symbolized the highest echelon of motorsport excellence, the team that had been synonymous with victory, with legacy, with a kind of pressure that either crushes a driver or elevates him into the realm of immortality. And now, at the twilight of his career, After rewriting the record books, after redefining what it meant to be a champion, Lewis Hamilton had finally arrived. He was not just stepping into a car, he was stepping into history. The same seat that had carried Michael Schumacher to greatness, that had been graced by Niki Lauda's relentless brilliance, by Alberto Ascari's domination, by the ghosts of champions past, still lingering in the very air of Maranello. This was not merely a transfer. It was an ascension, a passage into something bigger than himself. And he knew it. This was different. It had to be different. He had spent his entire career at the pinnacle of the sport, but never in an environment like this. Mercedes had given him stability, precision, an almost clinical perfection that allowed him to construct his era of dominance piece by piece, season by season. It had been a dynasty built on structure, on the relentless pursuit of efficiency, of technical supremacy. But Ferrari was not about cold calculation. Ferrari was visceral, emotional, unpredictable. It was a team where passion often dictated decision-making, where the burden of expectation was not just carried but felt in every heartbeat of the machine. The Tifosi, a force unlike any other fanbase in motorsport, were not merely spectators. They were believers, worshippers of speed, of triumph, of the red machine that had captured the hearts of generations. To them, Hamilton was not just another world champion coming to try his luck. He was the chosen one, the driver they had waited for, the man who would bring them back to glory after nearly 2 decades of pain, of near misses, of watching their most bitter rivals bask in the success that should have been theirs. The pressure was not foreign to him. He had spent his entire career under the weight of expectation, under the relentless glare of scrutiny, but this was something else. This was a pressure not just to win but to restore, to redeem, to bring back the golden days of Ferrari dominance. Every race would not just be a competition, it would be a statement. Every qualifying lap would carry the weight of millions of dreams. Every decision, every mistake, every moment of brilliance would be amplified, dissected, revered or vilified. There would be no middle ground. Either he would be the hero they had been waiting for, or he would be the latest in a long line of disappointments, swallowed by the same forces that had undone those who came before him. And yet, as he stepped into the car for the first time, as he fastened the belts and felt the familiar yet entirely foreign grip of the wheel, he felt something he had not felt in years. Excitement. Real, unfiltered excitement. This was not just another car. This was a machine with soul, with character, with a personality that had been forged in the fires of Maranello. The moment he fired up the engine, the distinct growl of the Ferrari power unit sent a shiver down his spine. This was different from anything he had driven before. There was a rawness to it, an untamed aggression that felt like it was begging to be unleashed. Mercedes had built cars that were refined, that obeyed with precision, that allowed him to extract performance through meticulous control. But this Ferrari? This was something else. It was alive. It did not simply respond to inputs, it reacted, it demanded, it pushed back. The first laps were a revelation. The way the car surged forward under acceleration, the way it attacked corners with a kind of controlled violence, the sheer force of its power delivery, it was intoxicating. He had expected a challenge, had known that adaptation would be required, but what he had not anticipated was how utterly enthralling the experience would be. It was a dance, but unlike the fluid, methodical waltz he had perfected at Mercedes, this was something wilder, something more primal. The car had edges, it had bite, it had a refusal to be tamed completely. It was aggressive, yet refined. Brutal, yet elegant. A paradox of engineering brilliance that only Ferrari could create. And it was not just the car. It was the environment, the atmosphere, the very essence of the team that made this experience so unlike anything he had ever known. In Brackley, he had been part of an empire, a machine of success that functioned with meticulous precision. At Maranello, he was stepping into something far more ancient, more deeply ingrained into the fabric of the sport. The halls of the Ferrari factory were lined with history, the echoes of past triumphs still present in every corner. The people, the mechanics, the engineers, they did not just work for Ferrari, they lived Ferrari. This was more than a job. It was a calling. Every member of the team carried the weight of expectation in their eyes, the unspoken understanding that what they were doing was not merely competing, it was upholding a legacy. He had spoken with Charles Leclerc, his new teammate, the man who had become the face of Ferrari in recent years, and the conversation had only reinforced the reality of what he was stepping into. Leclerc, immensely talented, immensely driven, had already experienced the highs and lows of being Ferrari's star driver. He had felt the crushing weight of missed opportunities, of strategic blunders, of cars that were never quite good enough. He knew what Hamilton was about to face. There was mutual respect, but there was also an unspoken tension. They both knew how this would go. There could be no co-leadership at Ferrari. There never had been. One driver always emerged as the true force within the team, and the battle for supremacy would be inevitable. Hamilton's mind raced through all the possibilities. He thought of Schumacher, of how he had molded Ferrari into his own kingdom, how he had commanded the team with an authority that left no doubt about who was in charge. He thought of Alonso, of the bitter power struggles, of the infighting that had ultimately unraveled his championship dreams. He thought of Vettel, of the highs, the lows, the way he had carried the weight of Ferrari's expectations only to be discarded when things fell apart. He knew what was at stake. This was not just another chapter in his career. This was the defining moment. Succeed, and his place in history would be untouchable. Fail, and he would become just another name in Ferrari's long list of almosts. And yet, as he pushed the car harder, as he felt the tires bite into the asphalt, as he flicked through the gears and let the engine roar down the straight, he smiled. Because this was what he had been searching for. The thrill. The uncertainty. The challenge. After years of dominance, of perfection, of knowing exactly what to expect, he was stepping into the unknown. And he welcomed it. Because legends are not made in comfort. They are forged in fire. And this, he knew, would be the fight of his life. It wasn't just the car that made this experience profoundly different. It was the entire universe that revolved around it. Every breath of Maranello's air carried with it the weight of an empire, a legacy forged through fire and fury, through triumphs that had become legend and failures that had been mourned like the fall of great kings. The very fabric of this place was interwoven with history. The walls of the Ferrari factory whispered the names of the titans who had come before, from Ascari to Schumacher, from Lauda to Villeneuve. This was no mere racing team. It was the beating heart of Formula One, the eternal spirit of motorsport itself. The factory was unlike anything Hamilton had ever seen in his career. He had spent over a decade at Mercedes, in an environment of calculated precision, German efficiency, and relentless technological advancement. Every aspect of his time there had been meticulously planned, methodically structured, ruthlessly optimized. But Ferrari? Ferrari was something else entirely. This was an organism, a living, breathing entity fueled by passion rather than mere logic, driven by emotion as much as by data. It was an institution where history weighed on every decision, where pride was not a secondary factor but the very foundation of its existence. Every engineer, every mechanic, every strategist carried with them a responsibility that stretched far beyond their own careers. They were the custodians of something ancient, something sacred. This was not just a job to them. It was a calling. Walking through Maranello, Hamilton could feel it in the air. The endless corridors, the trophies that stood like monuments to the past, the photographs of Enzo Ferrari overseeing his empire like a deity still watching over his creation. The workers didn't just see themselves as employees. They were part of something bigger, something timeless, a force that transcended sport. This wasn't just another racing outfit with a storied history. It was a religion, a belief system that had been passed down through generations. You didn't just drive for Ferrari. You became Ferrari. And now, he was part of it. For an entire year, Hamilton had lived with the anticipation of this moment. He had imagined it in his mind 1,000 times. What it would feel like to wear the red, to step into the car, to hear the echoes of the past surround him. But reality was so much more than expectation. The transition from Mercedes had been the most emotionally and mentally demanding challenge he had faced in years. Leaving behind the team that had been his home for over a decade, the people who had built an empire alongside him, the engineers who had understood his every instinct, it had not been easy. There had been nights of doubt, moments of hesitation, an internal war between the desire for a new challenge and the comfort of what he had built at Mercedes. Was he making a mistake? Was this gamble worth it? Would Ferrari truly be the place where he could write the final defining chapter of his career, or would it be a miscalculation that would leave his legacy tarnished? The questions had haunted him for months. Every interview, every press conference, every conversation with journalists had revolved around the same themes. Why leave Mercedes? Why now? Why Ferrari? And every time he had given the same measured answers, the carefully crafted explanations about the desire for a new challenge, about the lure of the Prancing Horse, about the opportunity to do what so few had done, bring Ferrari back to championship glory. But beneath the surface, the doubts had lingered. Until now. Now, as he sat in the cockpit of the Ferrari, Gripping the wheel, hearing the distinctive roar of the engine behind him, he understood. There was no doubt anymore. No hesitation. No uncertainty. This was where he was meant to be. This was the destiny that had been waiting for him all along. The energy of Maranello was unlike anything he had ever experienced. This wasn't just another season. This wasn't just another drive. This was something deeper, something almost spiritual. Every great driver had their defining moment, the challenge that pushed them to their absolute limits, the test that separated the legends from the merely great. For Senna, it had been McLaren-Honda, the relentless battles with Prost, the unwavering pursuit of perfection. For Schumacher, it had been the resurrection of Ferrari, the transformation of a struggling team into an unstoppable dynasty. And now for Hamilton, this was his moment. The challenge was immense. Ferrari was not an easy team to succeed in. It was a team where politics played as significant a role as performance, where alliances within the factory could make or break a driver's season, where the internal power struggles often overshadowed the battle on track. Leclerc was not just another teammate. He was Ferrari's chosen son, the driver they had nurtured, the man they had built their future around. And Hamilton knew that, no matter what the press releases said, no matter what the team claimed about equal treatment, there was no such thing as true parity in Formula One. Every move he made would be scrutinized. Every word he spoke would be dissected by the Italian press. Every mistake would be amplified, every misstep turned into a crisis. At Mercedes, he had been untouchable, a king in his own castle. Here he was stepping into an arena where loyalty had already been claimed, where he was the outsider trying to claim a throne that was not meant for him. He would have to fight for every inch. The weight of expectation was suffocating. Ferrari had not won a driver's title since 2007. The hunger, the desperation for success was palpable. They had come close, only to fall short. The failures of the past decade had left scars, deep wounds that had not yet healed. And now, the responsibility to deliver was on him. He knew what they wanted from him. They didn't just want a winner. They wanted a savior. They wanted another Schumacher. They wanted a driver who would not only bring them back to the top but define an era, rewrite history, turn Maranello into the epicenter of dominance once again. But could he do it? Could he fight not just against Red Bull and Mercedes, not just against Verstappen and Norris, but against the very culture of Ferrari itself? Against the politics, the favoritism, the relentless scrutiny that had crushed so many before him? For all his accomplishments, this would be his greatest test. The fight would not just be on the track. It would be in the garage, in the strategy rooms, in the hearts and minds of the people who worked tirelessly behind the scenes. He would have to win them over, prove that he was not just passing through, not just another great driver taking a final lap before retirement. He would have to embed himself into the DNA of Ferrari, make them believe in him the way Mercedes had, the way McLaren once had. It was a challenge unlike any other. But as he gripped the wheel, as the engine roared to life, as the ghosts of Maranello watched in silence, he knew one thing. He had never been more ready. The road ahead would be treacherous, filled with obstacles, uncertainties, and relentless opposition from every direction. The championship fight would be nothing short of gladiatorial, a relentless, no-holds-barred war of skill, endurance, and sheer willpower. The battle with Charles Leclerc would not just be a clash of teammates but an ideological war within Ferrari itself, a contest to determine who truly deserved the crown within the most historic and revered team in Formula One history. The dynamic between them would not be defined solely by race results, but by politics, strategy, and influence. Leclerc was not merely another competitor. He was the future Ferrari had meticulously groomed, a driver whose connection to the Scuderia ran deeper than simple contractual obligations. The Monégasque had embedded himself within the team structure, building relationships with key figures, earning the loyalty of the engineers, and cementing himself as the homegrown hero Ferrari had bet their future on. But now, the equation had changed. Hamilton's arrival was a declaration, a shift in Ferrari's philosophy, an admission that the team needed an external force, a proven champion, to restore its legacy. That shift, however, would not come without resistance. Leclerc would not simply step aside. He would fight tooth and nail for supremacy, unwilling to cede control over the team he had called home for years. And while Ferrari may have envisioned a harmonious partnership between the two, history had proven time and again that such coexistence was a fantasy in Formula One. When two elite drivers are pitted against each other, alliances crumble, friendships turn to rivalries, and internal conflicts can become as intense as the battles on the track. Yet Leclerc was only one of many obstacles standing in Hamilton's way. Outside the walls of Maranello, the threats were even greater. Red Bull, led by the unrelenting force of Max Verstappen, stood as the dominant empire of the modern era, a juggernaut of performance, precision, and unshakable confidence. Verstappen, already a multiple-time world champion, had no intention of relinquishing his grip on the sport. He had built Red Bull into an extension of himself, a finely tuned machine that revolved around his strengths, optimized to his aggressive, relentless driving style. Every move Hamilton made would be countered, every weakness exploited, every moment of vulnerability seized upon. Red Bull had mastered the art of suffocating the competition, forcing teams into mistakes, draining them of confidence, and ensuring that any challenger who dared to rise was quickly crushed beneath their weight. Mercedes, too, remained a formidable adversary. Though they had struggled in recent years, the team had not forgotten how to win. They had built an empire alongside Hamilton, forged in the fires of dominance, and while his departure had marked the end of an era, it had also ignited a burning desire within them to prove they could succeed without him. They had a point to make, a reputation to defend, and a hunger to reclaim what had once been theirs. And then there was McLaren, the rising force, the dark horse, the team that had spent years clawing its way back to the front, inch by inch, race by race. With Lando Norris and a resurging package, they posed a wild-card threat, capable of upsetting the established order and throwing chaos into an already volatile season. Each race weekend would be a battlefield, an unpredictable gauntlet of strategy, tire degradation, weather variables, and split-second decisions that could determine the course of a championship. Ferrari had the tools to fight, but they had not yet proven they could sustain that fight over an entire season. Their Achilles heel had always been consistency. Brilliant on some weekends, bewilderingly off the pace on others. Strategic miscalculations, pit stop blunders, and reliability concerns had haunted them for years. The arrival of Hamilton did not erase those issues overnight. If Ferrari truly wanted to win, they would need to evolve, to refine every aspect of their operation, to sharpen themselves into a weapon capable of taking on the giants who had ruled the sport for the last decade. And then there was the weight of expectation, the suffocating, unrelenting force that came with wearing the red suit of Ferrari. Mercedes had been a fortress, a well-oiled machine that shielded its drivers from unnecessary distractions, but Ferrari was different. At Maranello, every word spoken, every decision made, every lap completed was scrutinized under the merciless glare of the Italian media and the millions of tifosi who lived and breathed every moment of the team's journey. When Ferrari won, the country celebrated as if a national triumph had been achieved. When they lost, the criticism was brutal, relentless, and inescapable. Legends had been built and broken within these walls, careers forged and shattered under the immense pressure that came with driving for the Scuderia. Hamilton had never faced anything like this before. Yes, he had dealt with media pressure, with public scrutiny, with the high expectations that came with being a 7-time world champion. But Ferrari was different. Ferrari was not just a team, it was an institution, a religion, a symbol of Italian pride and racing history. And now, at the age of 40, he was stepping into the lion's den, willingly placing himself at the center of a storm unlike anything he had ever encountered. This was not just a test of his driving ability. It was a test of his resilience, his adaptability, his ability to withstand the political games, the strategic intricacies, and the relentless intensity that came with being the face of Ferrari. He was no longer the young prodigy who had burst onto the scene in 2007. He was no longer the dominant force who had ruled the hybrid era. He was now the veteran, the legend seeking one final chapter of glory. And that chapter would not be written easily. There would be setbacks. There would be heartbreaks. There would be moments of doubt, moments where he questioned whether he had made the right decision, moments where the weight of it all threatened to break even him. But there would also be moments of triumph, moments of brilliance, moments where the world was reminded why he was one of the greatest drivers in the history of the sport. As he gripped the wheel of the Ferrari, feeling the raw power beneath him, hearing the unmistakable roar of the engine, he knew one thing for certain: this was the challenge he had been searching for. This was the battle he had been missing. This was the moment that would define the closing years of his career. He had not come here simply to compete. He had not come here to play a supporting role in someone else's story. He had come here to fight, to prove that even after all the records, all the victories, all the championships, he was still capable of something extraordinary. The road ahead would be brutal. The enemies would be fierce. The obstacles would be unforgiving. But that was precisely why he had chosen this path. Because in the end, Legends are not made in moments of comfort. They are forged in the fires of adversity, in the battles that test every fiber of one's being. And as the lights of the first race of the 2025 season prepared to go out, Lewis Hamilton knew that what lay ahead would be the most extraordinary, most grueling, and perhaps the most defining chapter of his storied career.